jumped the gun. I couldn't even wait for the countdown. Welcome to the Krueger Show, everybody. On a Thursday, we are off and running. All right, we're going to talk a little 49ers today. Vish Kumaran in the house. Man, we haven't talked to Vish in, at least 24 hours.
Not even.
Not even. That's right. It was last night. Vish, how are you, my man? How's your Thursday going in the great state of Illinois?
I'm good. We talked about weather yesterday, did we not?
We did.
We have a beautiful day today, about 65 degrees Fahrenheit high. It's really, really nice. Not exactly sunny. The sun has been in and out of the clouds. We've had, a few droplets of rain. I sound like the pilot when we land somewhere telling you the weather at a destination. But, we talked about the weather in Chicago, and it's been quite pleasant today.
Welcome to O'Hare International Airport.
Exactly.
The time locally is 5:02 Central Time. Temperature on the ground, ladies and gentlemen, is a cool 72. Welcome to Chicago. Be careful when you're boarding. When you're deboarding, watch your step. Thanks for taking JetBlue. Does that sound pretty close?
Yeah. Why JetBlue there?
I don't know. I would thank you for taking American Airlines.
Okay.
I think my mom back in the day she worked for, I think, United when she was, because she lived in Chicago, so she worked for United Airlines for a while. All right, we're off and running, and it wouldn't be a day of the week if there wasn't a rumor attached to the 49ers.
Right.
So we start right there. We'll go with Bill Barnwell, because Bill Barnwell, Vish, you're obviously familiar with Bill Barnwell, right? I mean,
Big fan.
Now, what is his claim to fame? Because, like, if you see him like on with SVP, I don't know. He doesn't, it's not like I'm anything great to look at, but I mean, he's definitely not like a pretty face. He's obviously a guy. Well, I mean, I don't mean not. I mean, my point is, what he's known for is not his looks. He's known for his brain, but he is held in very high regard. What can you tell us about the great Bill Barnwell? Or should I look up?
An incredible writer. He's just an incredible writer. He's
but he seems to have football knowledge, right? He's
detailed. Yeah. He's done his research. Do you know what Grantland was?
Yeah.
The extension of ESPN with Bill Simmons.
Right.
He was one of the writers there. Him, Robert. Do you know Zach Lowe in basketball? He's like the NFL version of Zach Lowe.
Just like a really super knowledgeable guy that's incredibly respected.
Right. Very sophisticated, detailed.
Yeah. I mean, and he does an incredible job. Well, he has created first of all, I love Bill Barnwell. I love to read his, like, if the Niners are in the playoffs, I will absolutely, before I go on to do any kind of a pregame show, I will read his pregame breakdown. His breakdown of the Super Bowl is legendary. I mean, it's pages, and it's really, really good stuff. And there's and a lot of it, he's highlighting some of the great matchups and the game he's so good at kind of highlighting the game within the game.
Right.
Well, he put together a whole mock draft of nothing but trades, which is awesome. So every single team in the mock basically is trading. And his deal was, he had a deal with the 49ers. So Barnwell released his mock draft with potential trades for every single pick in the first round. And he has the 49ers trading Trey Lance with all three of their third-round draft choices and a sixth-round draft choice, all going to the Minnesota Vikings, it looks like. Who has Nick Mullins? Minnesota?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Niners in turn would get the 21st pick in the draft, and wait for it, Nick Mullins. I can't believe that. I mean, that's unbelievable. That first of all, just without me giving you any more commentary, hearing that trade, what do you think? Who wins that trade? Is that a win for the Niners? Is it a win for the Vikings? How do you view that one?
Wins and loss on that trade it's very tough to tell, right? We don't know who they would take at pick 21, and so much about Trey Lance is still unknown to us. And so at that point we would have to wait a couple of years before we would know who would actually win and lose that trade. Now, in terms of if we want to go to that hypothetical, would I do that trade? I would not personally. It's because of this draft in particular, Larry. I think there's maybe, 5 to 10 really, really top, high level, definite top 15 pick type players in this draft. And then after that, the drop off, it becomes very, very saturated. Like if you go on any draft rankings, right, from any expert, you would see 1 and 2 be pretty similar across the board at each position, and then 2 through 6 in every position, different people like different guys. And that's the reality of this draft. There's a lot of people that are very, very similarly situated between like probably player number 20 on people's board to player number, 40 or player number 50. And that's where when I look at this particular draft and pick number 21, is that going to be a player that I look like is going to walk into the 49ers and be a game changer to win a Super Bowl this year? Because to me, when you're trading Trey Lance, it's about winning a Super Bowl this year. I'm not sure I can answer that question. I still think having the quarterback when your other quarterback who you think is going to be the starter, having the quarterback, when the other quarterback you think that's going to be the starter is injured, I still think having a quarterback is more valuable, especially one that you think is talented and one you gave so many assets to acquire. So, I mean, when you're talking about trading those 3 first-round picks or 3 third-round picks, excuse me, I'm having Freudian slip galores here, and Trey Lance, Larry, for just pick number 21 and Nick Mullins, I wouldn't do that. I would prefer to get a veteran, proven player in return for Trey Lance if we're going the route of trading Trey Lance or perhaps an even higher pick.
I just think it's too much. I think it's too much. I don't like the trade either. I really don't. I just don't think. I mean, what is Trey Lance worth? I think Trey Lance is probably worth a second-round pick. Would you trade a second-round pick, 3 third-round picks, and a 6th-round pick to get to 21 or 22
Right.
in the first round? I wouldn't. That's not good value. I wouldn't make that trade either. And I don't like Nick Mullins. I don't want Nick Mullins back. Why? What do I need Nick Mullins for? No. I'm not a fan of Nick Mullins. And then I don't want to trade 4 picks and Trey to get 1 pick that's not in the top 10.
Right.
I mean, and you're talking to a guy who's really loved some of the players that will be on the board there too. I mean,
okay.
You might be able to get, looking at the board, you might be able to get Michael Mayer from Notre Dame. I love Michael Mayer. Emmanuel Forbes. There's some good players there. You might be able to get a tackle.
Dalton
Kincaid, if you want a tight end.
Banks, maybe.
Julius Brents from Kansas State, if you want a big corner. I mean, if you want a great slot safety, / corner. Jartavius Martin from Illinois. Branch.
Sidney Brown.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys there. I mean, Foskey, we mentioned yesterday from Notre Dame. And I like Foskey, and to me, of that group, Foskey and Mayer would be really hard to pass up. Not to mention the Northwestern guy, Adetomiwa Adebawore. That guy's just a freak of nature. So all these guys are there. So that, and even so, that's too much. That's too much. I would want more than that. I'd want something more than that. I would consider moving Trey, for that pick. And maybe a 3rd, but not all 3 thirds, and a 6th. And I don't want Nick Mullins. I'd rather just get more. I'd rather hold on to my picks and take a flyer in the draft. I mean, I read today that they said Max Duggan might not get drafted at all. So now what? I'm trading for Nick Mullins, but Max Duggan is available after the draft if you just throw cash his way. So no, I'm not interested in that. Barnwell's interesting. And he's well thought out. And I will say this, it might be, and this is where this whole Trey Lance thing is, you got to see where the rubber meets the road. What's the offers going to look like? What's he actually worth? I saw a Bleacher Report article, and they're like, trade Trey for a 5th and a 6th, One guy was like trade Trey for a late fourth and an early fifth. It's like, if that's what he's worth in the open market and Bleacher Report's right. I mean, I think the highest pick I think I saw Bleacher Report had him moved for was a third. They're not moving a guy they just invested the third pick in the draft in for a singular third round draft choice.
Right.
And they're definitely not doing it for a fourth and a fifth or a fifth and a sixth. I mean, so, but then Vish, maybe we have a higher. Yeah, I guess the question is this: has Trey Lance lost a lot of value in the minds of? In your mind, has he lost a lot of value? Because in my mind, he's lost value, but he's lost value on being the third pick overall in the draft. He hasn't lost value like, ship him out of here, get him out of here. I'll take a fifth, I'll take a sixth. No. I think if you're a team that thinks you're going to line up and steal Trey Lance from the Niners, I think the Niners are going to hold on to him if that's what their offers. If those are the offers they're receiving, fourth, fifth, sixth, they're not trading him, right?
Yeah,
or do you think? Or maybe you disagree with that.
No, I do agree with that. I think that's just the Niners philosophically, right? Like we saw that last offseason when they were trying to trade Jimmy Garoppolo before they changed their mind later in the offseason. They were pretty standing pat that they were, what was it reportedly? They wanted 2 2s for Jimmy Garoppolo and they were getting offered a third, or they were getting an offer to second and a third that they wanted 2 2s, right? It was something like that that was reported earlier in the offseason before he had surgery. Because Washington wanted Garoppolo, if I remember correctly, first before they pursued Carson Wentz from
Okay.
Indianapolis. And either way, the Niners were standing pat in terms of what they thought their value should be for a quarterback, right? And I'm assuming it's going to stay similar when they have invested so much in Trey Lance. So I agree with that standpoint. In terms of Trey Lance's actual value, Krug, it is impossible to tell right now. Because you're
Really?
right, he hasn't changed in terms of his value because he hasn't necessarily done anything on or off the field to disrupt what you would think of him as a prospect, right? So that prospect level still remains, and then he is still cost controlled for at least the next 2 years. So his contract isn't so bad where that's scaring you either. But the issue is Trey Lance was the unique prospect due to the COVID year that came out of college with a historically low number of pass attempts, right? And the entire thing about Trey Lance in that draft, while he was an enigma, was everyone was excited to see what would happen when he would play. We are 2 years from that draft when a lot of people had question marks about him solely because they felt like there wasn't enough experience there to draft a quarterback. And he has gotten next to none in terms of experience in those 2 years, right? He has not played football 3 out of the last 4 years. I think that there would be varying opinions on people on how positive or how skeptical, or whether they're positive or whether they're skeptical on him realizing his full potential as a prospect, because they might be looking at it as, well, we weren't sure about him when we came out, but we would have taken a flyer then because he was talented. Now it's been 2 years and we're still not sure. And I don't know if I would want to use a first round pick when I was already nervous 2 years ago about him not playing enough. And we're 2 years down the road into his career and he's still not played enough.
There's exactly, all I'll say here is that I think there's probably a backstory. You know what I mean? When it comes time to find out the details on this Trey Lance Niners thing,
right?
I think there's probably a backstory, and we know what we know only because the people who are in charge let us know what they want us to know, right? But the Car Gods does bring up an interesting question here in the chat, and a lot of people are pushing back saying this is not the case. But I'm going to put it on the board here. He says, this is the Car Gods. He says, check out some other channels and sports news outlets. Trey Lance might have requested the trade because he wants to compete to be the starter and not second string. If true, it makes sense. There's people.
How dare the Car Gods not watch us yesterday when you and I discussed this exact same topic last night?
We did, but as far as we never really broached the topic of what if Trey Lance. I mean, Trey has stated, Vish, that publicly
No,
that
we
he
didn't.
wants to be here long term. Right? He said he did say he would like to be here long term. He'd like to be a Niner for life. He's on record as saying that. But what if privately, quietly, he has said to them, as they have said to him, hey, Brock's the leader in the clubhouse. Maybe he's saying all the respectful things publicly, but you never know. He may, through his representative, have said, you know what, all things being equal, if you guys want to start Brock and go that way, we'd like out. And, the reason that has not become public is simply because, well, hey, look, if you want out, you absolutely can't say a single thing about it because you're killing our leverage if you say you want out. So just the fact that he's never said I want out doesn't mean he doesn't want to be out. So I'm just kind of wondering, and some people have suggested, hey, if I was Trey at this point, I'd demand a trade. And I've seen that a couple times on Twitter, which is an interesting response. But let's take that at face value. Let's say he has requested a trade. Isn't that interesting that there's so many people defending, the idea of no, he's not going anywhere. He's not going anywhere. While maybe behind the scenes, the possibility exists that he's requested to leave. I'm just saying, we don't know either way, but it is an interesting wrinkle on this thing to say, what if he wants out?
I think it's definitely possible just because of the timing of this news. Okay. And you and I talked about this yesterday. And I think it's a very, very nuanced and layered discussion if you want to talk about it from Trey Lance's standpoint. And so the reason to me it's plausible, Larry, is because if Trey Lance has to be moved, and this is what I said yesterday, he needs to be moved earlier in the offseason. And all Trey Lance has asked the 49ers so far is the chance to compete. That's all he said. That's the one thing he said publicly. That's never been clarified on what he's competing for. Now, Trey Lance, I think when he said he wanted a chance to compete, that chance was to compete with Brock Purdy for the starting job, not with Sam Darnold to back up Brock Purdy. Ian Rappaport claimed yesterday, later after he, reported earlier in the morning that the 49ers had fielded calls on Trey Lance, that every executive and coach he had talked to on the 49ers believed Brock Purdy was the future. Like it was cut and dry. It wasn't a Trey Lance or Brock Purdy. It was Brock Purdy is the future. If that is the case, then Trey Lance, as much as he would like to compete, as much as he might be confident that he could do the same things as Brock Purdy in this offense, with these receivers and this running back and Kyle Shanahan as the play caller, he might think he might just not be able to get that opportunity. And I see Raymond Martinez says Kyle Shanahan said, sure, Trey Lance can regain the starting job. But he was also asked the follow-up question by Matt Mayoko in the owners meeting, how can he regain the starting job if he doesn't play in games? And Shanahan admitted that it would be very difficult for Lance to overtake Purdy because of what Purdy did last year. So given all of that, and given that, Trey Lance is represented by CAA, Jimmy Sexton, very, very powerful agent, they know for a fact that this is Trey Lance, Larry, this is the most important year of his short-term future. How he plays this year will define if Trey Lance is viewed as a starting quarterback in the short-term future or if he's viewed as a backup quarterback in the short-term future, right? They're going to make a decision on his fifth-year option. It would behoove Trey Lance where if the Niners draft a quarterback and he feels like in June, if Brock Purdy's healthy, he's the odd man out and gets moved, it would make sense for him to want to get moved now and put the pressure and put this out now, right? This is out right now because somebody wants the world to know that the Niners are willing to take calls for Trey Lance and you just have to offer the right thing. And so since that's out, I feel like it could make sense where Trey Lance and his agent would want it to be out because they might think, hey, no matter what, we're going to be the odd man out. At least get me on a team right now this offseason where somebody invests in me as the guy, where there's a place for me, whereas after the draft, it might be difficult. And I can go through the full offseason there and get a chance to start there and do what's best for my career there. Now, that's all of this is contingent on the fact that what Rappaport says about all the execs and the coaches on the 49ers being fully bought into the idea that Brock Purdy is the future being true. But if Trey Lance feels like he has no chance to compete, I think this is how you request a trade, right? Because he has no equity to publicly request a trade the way Deebo Samuel did last year. He's not established himself in the NFL to do so. And it might not be something that, is his personality or he's doing to be a diva. It just might be a case of circumstance where he feels like, hey, no matter what I do, I just can't beat out Brock Purdy here. It's just not there. That opportunity doesn't exist. And I want to go to a place where the opportunity to start exists for me.
It's so interesting because there's just so many things going on. There's things that you say publicly, and then there's things that you don't say publicly. You would, because you don't want to ruin the guys. You don't want to ruin your own trade leverage, and there's a chance that a trade doesn't work out. You don't get what you want. The players then coming back into your room, so there's a relationship. Everything's very touchy in these situations. Raymond Martinez, as Kyle also said, Trey can regain the starting quarterback job. That's what he said. I mean, we could go and take his comments and put them on the board here for what he said in Arizona, but he said the kinds of things that you say when you're fielding trade offers. But to me, I would say go beyond what he said and just look at their overall kind of tone towards him. It seems very clear that at least in 1 year, it's funny. People always say he hasn't played much. He hasn't played much. I know. And in the midst of not playing much, it's pretty clear that their tone on him has changed in just a singular year. So why? Why did the tone change? But to me, the Barnwell trade, no, I wouldn't make that trade. No. But I do think I'll stay with what I think. I do think that they're going to trade him. I think there's enough teams out there that would offer them something that would be attractive enough for them to pull the trigger. And then the debate is what's attractive enough. And it's like this is totally debatable. I threw out to Matt Barrows a couple weeks ago, what if somebody called and offered a late first-round pick for Trey? Do you think the Niners would do it? And he said, no, I don't think that's enough. And then yet you look at Bleacher Report, they're suggesting these trades that they would move him for a fourth or a fifth. So there's obviously like a disconnect between what some people feels value is and others.
I think that disconnect exists because the 49ers should have no pressure to move him right now. Because they have a situation where
they're holding all the cards.
Yeah, right. And their quarterback is injured. And so everything in the 49ers' favor is to bring Trey Lance back and see what he is. And if he is taking steps forward and he's fully recovered from his injury, like it's great then for the 49ers, right? That's the best possible scenario. If he hasn't, they can then move him later in the offseason and figure out what happens with Brock Purdy's elbow and all of that. If the conversation about fielding trade offers for him is existing now, the only person that needs to be moved sooner rather than later is Trey Lance. Trey Lance, it would suck for Trey Lance if he had to go through this entire offseason only to get moved later in the offseason. It would screw him for his next landing spot, which that next landing spot is going to be very, very important for him. So if I think the only way this conversation exists, to be honest, Larry, is only if Trey Lance feels like he could be the odd man out later in the offseason and he doesn't feel like that's going to be fair to his next landing spot, so he wants to be moved now. Because I feel like if you're the 49ers, I just can't wrap my mind around why it would make sense to trade Trey Lance. It just doesn't to me. It just doesn't.
I mean, their timing, it doesn't make sense to move Trey Lance. But beyond the timing, why would it make sense to trade Trey Lance? Only if you didn't believe. If you believe that he was not a good quarterback, then you would want to trade him. Why? Because his trade value is better today than it will be after he plays if you don't think he's good. That's one. And they've watched him more than we have. So if they don't believe in him, you should trade him. If you do believe in him, you shouldn't trade him. But but also the other wrinkle in this is if you've just it's very possible that Trey's agents behind the scenes are saying, Trey, you just say all the right things. We're going to play super hardball. And they could have gone to the Niners and say, look, Brock Purdy, nice story. Great. Mr. Irrelevant. Had a nice little run. You invested in us. You took our guy in the third pick overall. You traded a bunch of assets to get him. He hasn't gotten a chance to play. It's time for him to play. You going to play him or are you going to go with Brock? And kind of force their hand, and maybe that's why they've come out so concretely across the board with Jed, Kyle, and John all saying, you know what, Brock's the guy we're going with, or Brock's the leader in the clubhouse, because it's almost like they've made that evaluation. Now, can they have both? If they can, then they've got a ready-made room. But if they can't have both because Trey wants to be the starter, then maybe that's why we're seeing the trade talks. I don't know. It's very bizarre, but I will say this. They're both starters, and so they both can't start. So eventually one will probably be moved on. The question is when. The timeline I thought made sense on the draft because that's when so many teams will make their decisions. And Vish, you know the NFL, very few trades seem like they happen after the draft. They're usually before the draft or going into the draft or during the draft. But if you believe Ian Rappaport, he's kind of painted a picture of after the 49ers know what they have in Brock Purdy as far as his return, then you're going to see a trade. I mean, he was very specific about it.
And that's right. And if he was specific about it, and if you believe Trey Lance is going to be traded this offseason, I told you this, I think when you and I debated this, when you were saying he's going to be traded before the draft, I said the only way it makes sense for the 49ers to trade him is later on in the offseason when they know what's happened with Brock Purdy. They can't trade him right now, not to mention the cap hit, right? It's being talked about right now in the chat. It's $10 million. That they lose against the cap if they trade him before June 1st. Now, after June 1st, that becomes a little bit different. But for Trey Lance, Larry, if he's going to be traded, it should be now. It should be now. Latch on to somewhere where they look at you as the answer in 2023 and they don't draft a quarterback or they don't invest in something else. It then allows you to have the full offseason program with whatever new team you're going to. And that's where, like, if you're the 49ers, sure, you can field offers all day on Trey Lance and you can listen to them, but unless you're like absolutely blown away where you just can't turn it down, you can just keep holding on to him because he's more valuable to you right now than he is anywhere else, and you don't have a quarterback still, right? Purdy's injured and you don't know when he's going to come back and how healthy he's going to be when he comes back. But if you're Trey Lance and you're saying, hey, if Purdy comes back in June, I'm screwed. I'm the odd man out. They paid Sam Darnold this much money. I feel like they're going to draft a quarterback. I am screwed in that situation. He's represented by CAA, right? Powerful agents, right? Jimmy Sexton's a powerful quarterback agent.
No doubt.
If they feel like, hey, our client is going to be the odd man out, and it's going to affect Trey Lance's direct financial future because the decision on his fifth-year option is going to be made this year, right after year 3. So it's kind of a make or break year for him on the field because it's going to dictate a lot of his short-term future financially. Then it would, again, behoove them to get him out of here as soon as possible to the new location so that he can maximize his opportunity to succeed there. So in terms of the timeline, to me, if we're talking Trey Lance trade now, that's where I feel like under the radar are his agents, pushing something with the 49ers because they don't want to be playing this game of chicken. And then in July, the Niners find out great news about Brock Purdy's elbow. They're satisfied with how Sam Darnold looks at camp, and they just dump Trey Lance somewhere else, and he's left, grasping at straws because, he's going to go somewhere with the shortened offseason. There's going to be the pressure of being traded, all of that, and they screw him at his next location as well. And so that's where I think this situation is very, very nuanced here because
yes, that's a great point. Actually, nobody ever brings that point up. That there's a timing on if he was going to be traded. There's a timing that's acceptable for the other team and a timing that's too late. And just because the Niners have to wait on Brock Purdy doesn't mean there's going to be another team that's going to sit there and say, yeah, we'll still offer you the same compensation and we'll allow you to just take your sweet old time. And then whenever you want to throw this young quarterback into our mix, we'll just take it from there. No. Because Trey Lance is not nearly as valuable to you if you don't have him in April and May as he is he's less valuable if you get him in August. Than he is if you get him in April or May, right? Just because there's so much 100%. To learn. There's a ton to learn.
100%. And I just feel like the only way Larry, I've told you this from the beginning. I just don't understand why you would trade him if you're the 49ers. I just don't get it. He's played 4 games. You had such belief in him a year ago. You made him the starter. Like, if Brock Purdy was healthy, I can kind of understand moving forward in that direction. But without having, the full idea of how healthy he is, how ready he will be when he will be back, I just never understood trading Trey Lance. But at least right now, But if we're talking, hey, Trey Lance is looking at the situation and him and his agents are making a push. And now I know people are going to say, well, Trey Lance said, oh, all he wants is a chance to compete. And he said all the right things publicly. It doesn't feel like his personality. It might not be what he wants to do. It might just be the best business decision for his career because they might be reading the tea leaves the same way Larry has been reading the tea leaves for this long. And it just might be a situation where, hey, we got to do what's best for him. He can't publicly request a trade the way Deebo Samuel did. He doesn't have the equity of being a first-team All-Pro. He doesn't have the leverage here. He has to continue doing all this right things publicly because the next team is going to be monitoring and wondering why the San Francisco 49ers are trading the third overall pick 4 games into his career when, everybody thinks Shanahan and John Lynch are really, really smart. So he has to be doing all the right things that way. But behind the scenes, Jimmy Sexton could be in the 49ers ear like, yo, I need an answer now. Like, we need to get him out of here. So he's playing in 2023. He's either playing for you or he's playing for somebody else. Let's figure out who he's playing for, though.
Exactly. And we can sit here and bury our heads in the sand and be like, I don't see why they would trade him. Yeah, but we couldn't see why they would pick up somebody like Sam Darnold if Trey was really a franchise guy. Right? I mean, so if Trey's your franchise guy and he's absolutely the guy the same guy that you haven't changed one iota on how you feel about him, then Brock Purdy's injury shouldn't really matter at all, right? I mean, Brock's going to get healthy when he gets healthy. If
Right.
Trey's the guy, then Trey's just going to take the job and run with it. The fact of the matter is Trey's not the guy, and that's why Darnold is here. And I think that's the part that we kind of got to wrap our heads around. Now, maybe the Niners are wrong because they misevaluated Mahomes. They didn't go for Watson. They went with C.J. Beathard. They liked Brian Hoyer. It's not like the Niners are just totally infallible. If they don't like you, you're done. And if they love you, you're awesome. It's, these are all shades of gray. I mean, just because they like you doesn't mean you're good. Just because they don't like you doesn't mean that you're bad. It's like
I think they're wrong in this situation. Like,
yeah,
I
mean,
straight
who
up
knows?
think they're wrong. I think they're wrong, Larry, if they're considering trading him or talking about trading him, right? Like you mentioned it. They've missed and misevaluated the quarterback position over and over again. Like, why would you not hedge your bets, right? Like, Lance is the ultimate hedge right now for Purdy. You believe so much in him that you went up and got him there. Again, you and I agreed earlier in the show, he has not done anything on or off the field for us to think anything less of him as just a prospect, right? There's been nothing overly terrible on the field that's like, oh my God, that's scary. He's the worst quarterback we've ever seen. It's been up and down. And there's been nothing off the field that would make us say, oh, his personality, this is the reason he did all of these things wrong off the field. That's why he can't work, right? And so when both of those things exist, I just look at it, Larry, and I think, why would you trade him? It just makes no sense. You have Brock Purdy that's hurt. Like, why would you look to get rid of him? Why would you have so much conviction in your decision at the quarterback position when you've messed it up so many times? And the only thing that's prevented you from winning
now
the
that's
Super
a
Bowl
great
3 out of
question.
the last 4 years, 3 out of the last 4 years is the quarterback position between injury and lack of talent. So if injury and lack of talent is what's getting you there, why would you trade a talented quarterback at all?
But at the same time, while we can't really understand that, if they're telling us anything from their actions, they're telling us multiple times that they don't really believe in Trey. Why? Because they've watched Trey, they've watched Brock. Brock's not ready to play, and yet they're still like, Brock's our starter. And then and then Sam Darnold's there. And then we're meeting with quarterbacks that are projected to go in the 3rd round. Dorian Thompson-Robinson is projected to go in the 3rd round. So they're meeting with him 3 times. And unless that's a smokescreen, are they going to go quarterback in the 3rd round and sign Sam Darnold and say that Brock Purdy is the their number 1 quarterback? If in reality they're going with Trey Lance? I mean, do you see? It's just wild. There's wild contradictions in their actions.
Right. If because of Brock Purdy's injury, they didn't have to commit to Brock Purdy, and yet they still did. You and I talked about this after the owners meeting, right? Because I was saying that the entire time in the owners meeting, or the owners meeting and the combine presser with John Lynch, I was shocked because I thought their answers would be more along the lines of, "Hey, Purdy's hurt. We don't know where he's going to be. So we're just going to let it play out, and we're going to see when he comes back healthy. We loved what Trey was doing in 2022. We thought he was going to have a huge season. Unfortunately, he got hurt, but now he's going to be healthy. So we're going to see how the offseason goes with Trey, and then when Purdy gets healthy, we'll redecide between those two players then. Could have easily said that. They're not committing to either player. They're not offending either player. They're just acknowledging the reality of both players' injuries. Instead, they said, hey, Purdy's clearly the leader in the clubhouse, We can't deny how he played. He really played well. Lance needs reps. We don't know when he's going to get them, but he needs them. That's what John Lynch said at the Combine, right? Kyle Shanahan said, I think, Trey was going to have a huge season in 2022. He said, I think he could easily have done he could have done what Brock did with all of those weapons and all of that if he had gotten a chance to play. Well, if you believe all of that, then why is Sam Darnold here? Why is Trey Lance splitting reps with Sam Darnold? These questions are yet to be answered. I think even when Shanahan said, well, Trey could reacquire the starting job, if you remember, Matt Mayoko asked that follow-up question, Larry, and he said, well, how's he going to do that with just the offseason? And Shanahan didn't have an answer or a rebuttal for him. He said, you're right. It's true. It's going to be really hard. He's got his work cut out for him. But he just left the door cracked saying he can. He's not ruling out any possibility of it.
Yeah. I mean, Mitchell Ness says Darnold is not this blue chip signing. Niners got him on the cheap. His incentive's only if he plays, and he won't play unless there are injuries. Come on, Mitchell and Ness. Come on. They signed him on the first day before the first day of free agency.
They signed him on the first day.
And they obviously negotiated
the period.
And obviously they wanted him from way in advance because they negotiated out all the incentives prior to that. Yep. So Sam Darnold is going to sign an incentive-laden deal that he's not going to reach any of those incentives? Come on, man. I mean, come on. Let's just think it through a little bit. And also, Sam Darnold was playing good ball at the end of the year and probably would have had better opportunities than just to come to the Niners to be the backup to the backup. Right. So let's the reality is they're not saying anything negative about Trey, but the reality is they told you Brock's the starter. They told you they're not really sure about Trey by going and getting a quarterback like Darnold. And now they're showing you that we don't know what they're showing us, but they're looking at Dorian Thompson-Robinson. He's projected for the third round. So there's a chance they're going to use their highest draft choice on a quarterback as well. So think about that for a second. If the Niners pick number 99, go with Dorian Thompson-Robinson. And now they've added a quarterback at the top of their draft. I mean, there's lots of oddball indications for sure. So I don't know. I mean, there's a lot going on here to say the least. Couple on the super chat. Batman Lives says, call Amnesty International and let Trey go. Not fair. Not fair on this kid. Mitchell and Ness, anyone trying to hype Darnold up is laughable. People digging in the stats to pull a positive. Hey, Mitchell and Ness, you may want to go check out what Kyle Shanahan said about Sam Darnold, because people is one thing, the head coach of the team is another, and the head coach of the team describes Sam Darnold as having a skill set that's the equivalent to the best he's ever seen. Ever seen. So nobody's hyping up Sam Darnold more than Kyle Shanahan is, that's for sure. Archer says, hey, Krug, all these guys, some content creators that called you crazy and were 100% confident Trey wasn't going to get moved, are sweating hard right now. I don't know. I'm not sure about that either way. Gotcha says, Larry, will you shave your head and eyebrow when Trey doesn't get traded if you feel so confident? Gotcha. No. Breaking 80, shave an eyebrow. I've got a wife and a mortgage and 4 kids. I'm going to sit there at the dinner table with one eyebrow. Dad, why do you have one eyebrow? Well, I predicted that Trey Lance was going to be traded, and he wasn't traded, and Gotcha in the chat said I should do it.
He gotcha.
Gotcha. Breaking 89. Can't trade Lance until 1, Brock is cleared as game ready, and 2, Darnold proves that he is a system fit. Return must exceed risk. Of not contending, maybe, or not contending. All right. Couple other thoughts I want to get to you here before we're going to go quick tonight because I've got baseball coming up. I got this one that I think is kind of interesting. This was Tiki Barber. You familiar with Tiki and Tierney?
No,
Tiki
but
and
I'm familiar with Tiki Barber.
Yeah, Tiki Barber, a former New York Giant running back, is. Wait a second, let me turn that off. One of the stories of the day is that Tiki Barber on his radio show, Tiki and Tierney, he does a show with Brandon Tierney. There, of course, Tierney's a mad Jets fan, right? He's like literally around the clock. Refresh, refresh. Is Rodgers coming? Is Rodgers coming? He's in that mode. Um, but I don't know if Tiki's just trying to tweak Tierney, which is a possibility. But Tiki said on Tiki and Tierney um, that Barber indicated that Aaron Rodgers, in his mind, could be in a Niners uniform sooner rather than later. His quote was, "It's just a little crackling of flames starting to burgeon up underneath the leaves about Aaron Rodgers actually going to the 49ers as opposed to the Jets. Now has some validity," says Barber. "This team will go get Aaron Rodgers if he's available." And he's not the only guy suggesting that. Of course, Roethlisberger, the former Steeler quarterback, admitted that a trade between the Packers and Niners for Rodgers is starting to come to fruition. Roethlisberger said on the podcast, "I know he's been mentioned with them before. I could see it happening. They've got a great team, great defense. They got a lot of weapons. He likes the boots under center, getting out and moving. He'd be great in that offense, obviously." What do you think? Then Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino talked about the Niners' predicament on Locked On, the NFL scouting podcast. Basically, what Marino had to say echoes the same narrative. He said, "Would Rodgers rather go to the Jets or the 49ers?" Marino added. "He played his college ball at Cal. He prefers the West Coast. Seems like that would probably be pretty attractive to him." So now they're kind of reading the tea leaves. What do you think? Rodgers to the Niners? We've talked about this many, many, many times. This story kind of won't go away, but you kind of wonder, why is Rodgers to the Jets not a done deal? If it's a done deal, it's a done
That's
deal.
been reported, right?
Yeah, I mean,
they're both very, very adamant on the pick. The Packers want a guaranteed first round pick in 2024. The Jets want that to be conditional.
Is that the rub? Is that the crux of the? Is that what's keeping this trade up?
Yeah.
So do you think the deal gets done, or do you think the Niners? Do you see any scenario at all in which the Niners 11th hour roll in and go for Rodgers? I mean, to me, Rodgers only makes sense. I mean, because the Niners have already stated we're going with Brock Purdy. And Brock Purdy's our number one guy. Well, what if Brock Purdy, what he kind of alluded to the other day, that he potentially could be out for the year? What if that actually is the case and he's going to be out for the year? And let's just say the 49ers want to go through with their idea to trade Trey Lance. Maybe they don't believe Trey Lance is the guy either. Would they slip in there on Rodgers? Could they? Would they? What do you think?
I mean, never say never. I don't expect that to happen. Aaron Rodgers has stated publicly his interest to go to the Jets. This has been talked about pretty publicly. It would look very, very bad on him to go back on his word now, especially given that the Jets have done everything this offseason to kind of cater to the idea of him going there. Now, in terms of, if we're just talking from a football standpoint, if the 49ers could acquire him, I'm not going to say no to that. Absolutely not. He would be their best option by far in 2023. The goal is to win a Super Bowl today. This team is Super Bowl ready now. Why wouldn't you want a Hall of Fame quarterback who's won 2 out of the last 3 MVPs? Like, this is a no-brainer to me. This is like when 49ers fans didn't want Peyton Manning in 2012. They didn't want Tom Brady in 2019. Like, it's a no-brainer to me if you have the opportunity to get him. I just don't see how they could have the opportunity. It would look really, really bad on so many different people when this has been publicly said to be a done deal, confirmed. That's where he's going. The Jets have made moves to cater to him already, right? Like trading Elijah Moore, signing Allen Lazard, and now for him to renege and go to the 49ers would look really, really bad.
Yeah. No, I just think it's just hard to picture it. And it's, I can't see Green Bay sending him to the Niners. I think he's kind of mad at the Niners. I don't, I haven't heard anything that makes me really feel that like Brock Purdy would be out for the year. I just think it would be a bad fit in a lot of ways. I mean, at one point or another, I thought it would have been an ideal fit. Heck, I literally put my head on the table in the conference room across from the war room the day they passed on Rodgers for Alex Smith. I was like, oh my God. I could not believe it. They blew it that day, but I don't see it. I don't see it. I know there's been a lot of talk, but and people love the idea of it, and I think he would be a great fit. But there's so much more to making this happen than just Rodgers would be a good fit in the boot game. There's just a lot that has to happen on the cap with the other quarterbacks, with Green
Right,
Bay, with a
right.
trade. I mean, it just seems like too many hurdles to make that a reality. Okay, let's look ahead. One thing I want to get your thoughts on. I got a couple things I want to throw you, but one thing I got to get your thoughts on. Somebody asked me, who's a big time Niner fan of mine, he's like, Krug, where is the biggest need for the Niners? And, I went through the same thing that I would go through if you asked me that question. Well, they could use this and they could use that. And then my buddy pushed back and he's like, but where do they need like a starter today that they don't have a starter? And I go, that's a great question. And I go, I'm going to bring that up to Vish in our next live stream. Like the Niners could use a receiver, but they don't need a starter. They could definitely use an offensive lineman, but is Colton McKivitz a starter, or do you view them needing a starter at right tackle? They could use a tight end, but Kittle's the starter. They could use another quarterback, probably, but we know it's either Lance Darnold or Purdy that will start.
Right.
They could use a speed back, but McCaffrey is the starter. Do they need a starter on the defensive line opposite Bosa? That's where I kind of went there because to me, Drake Jackson, Cleveland Farrell, Austin Bryant, Kerry Hyder, I like Drake the most of that group by far, but I don't know that any of them are a starter. So I would say they may need a starter at defensive end opposite Nick Bosa, and they may need a starter at the nickelback. The nickelback position where they signed Miles Hartsfield, they picked up Isaiah Oliver, they had Jimmy Ward. I don't know about Hartsfield. I don't know exactly what Isaiah Oliver. To me, if I was saying, do they need a starter? There's really three positions: defensive end, nickel, and maybe kicker. If you don't believe Zane Gonzalez is a starter, maybe he's just like a filler. Or people have suggested that they still want Robbie Gould, that they'll still draft a kicker. But where would you say is there? Where do they need a starting player? Because that's probably where they're going to go in the third round.
I mean, you answered the question. You nailed
But I
the
mean, which one for you though? Because some people would argue offensive tackle, some people would argue nickel, some people would argue kicker, some people would argue defensive end. What's the primary to you?
defensive end.
They need a starter.
Yeah, because I think at offensive tackle, to me, actually, I do look at Colton McKivitz as a starter. I think I've been consistent on that this entire offseason. I said I thought they would extend him. They did that. I do view him as a starter. Um, At nickel, I view Isaiah Oliver as a starter. I view
Okay.
Diamador Lenore as a starter for sure. And so I think that's two possible players. I think right now at defensive end, I view Drake Jackson as someone that could be a starter, but based on what we have seen, I view him as a situational pass rusher only at this point. And then I view Cleveland Furl as a two down player 100%. And so if we're talking about a starter that's going to play all three downs at defensive end, I don't know if I see a player now. The Niners can do so many creative things with their defensive line now, right? They could start their defensive line with Eric Armstead kicking back outside, right? Imagine running the football on first and second down on a defensive line of Nick Bosa, Javon Kinlaw, Javon Hargrave, excuse me, and then Eric Armstead on the edge. You're not running the football. It's going to be very, very hard to run the ball on first and second down. Pull Kinlaw on third down unless his pass rushing has improved tremendously and Armstead kicks inside and Drake Jackson or Cleveland Ferrell or whoever comes in on third down. That's definitely a possibility. In that case, yeah, then Armstead is a for sure starter. Nobody's questioning that they need a starter at defensive end if he's playing there. So I think, Larry, it's a little bit nuanced on which position do they truly need a starter because we're not 100% sure how they're going to line up. But if we're pretending that Armstead and Javon Hargrave are starting inside, and Bosa is going to start on one side, then what's the question on who's going to start on the other side and be like a 3-down player? I guess exists. Although Drake Jackson, again, he's a second-round pick. It's tough to feel like they need to invest right away, right back in that position when they've just invested a high asset in a very talented player.
Mel Kiper has nailed the 49ers one of their primary needs, and that is right tackle. I don't know if you've seen the latest 3-round mock draft, but Mel Kiper has mocked an offensive lineman named Joey Fisher to the 49ers out of Shepherd University. He's a Division II right tackle. And so I did the deep dive and watched this guy, took out his film and looked at it. My God. I mean, if this guy is there in the 3rd round, this is the right tackle they need. This guy stopped playing football for 3 years because he decommitted to Maryland and left Towson, and he couldn't find a school willing to give him a scholarship. So he worked with his dad as a locksmith, and then somehow got a look as a tight end at Shepherd University. And then they quickly saw that he had great offensive line potential. They moved him to offensive line like day one. He made 43 starts at right tackle. Jets worked him out as center. But then in his local pro day, I mean, he looked good at the college all-star game, the collegiate pro game. He got invited to the Senior Bowl, but he broke his hand. So then he didn't get invited to the combine. So he had to go to their pro day. But at their pro day, Vish, 40 reps at 225 would have led all linemen in Indy. He ran 4.90, would have led all linemen in Indy. Super long arms, says the guy that he models his game after is Trent Williams. But this guy is, when you watch him in the film, I mean, granted, it's Division II, and when you're watching offensive linemen in Division II, they do kick ass. I mean, they literally are beating guys up. But this guy is a mauler in the run game. Just super nasty, super looking to just bury you into the ground. And I mean, some people think he's a right guard and not a tackle. We'll find out, I guess. But man, to me, Kiper nailed that one. Joey Fisher. Remember that name on draft day. If he winds up in the 3rd round, he might be exactly what the Niners need as a right tackle. They need a big, tough, road grading guy who can play right tackle for the next decade, don't you think? I mean, I like McKivitz, but I think McKivitz's greatest thing is the utility factor. He can play everywhere, smart, versatile, but I think they could use a real thumper at right tackle. I don't know. Should go watch the guy.
I agree.
I agree.
It's very hard to get perspective. I understand the player you're describing, and the player you're describing to me sounds like a 1st-round pick.
He's a pancake monster at the double.
Right.
His film is awesome, but you got to remember the guys he's blocking are going to be whatever doing. They're going to be carpenters or driving UPS trucks or having their own YouTube show or something. You know what I mean? They're not going to be NFL guys.
Jeez,
so you got to remember that.
Carpenter having their own YouTube show. Jeez.
I was just thinking whatever. But you know what I'm saying? They're not NFL D linemen that he's blocking at the Division II level. And I'll be honest, when I saw the guy for Tampa Bay, Ali Marpet?
Yes.
When I saw Ali Marpet's college film, I was like, oh my God, this guy is just, because he was destroying people.
Ali Marpet was a very, very excellent player for the 9 years that he was in the NFL. The Bucs missed him tremendously because he retired. But yeah, you nailed that one, Krug. You nailed that one.
Oh no, I remember that film. Sometimes, I remember watching Pierce Holt's film when he was coming out of Angelo State, and it was like, wow. When you see NFL players playing Division II, they stand out. You could see them, you could notice them from you could be standing at an office building 5 blocks away. Those guys would stand out to you. Vish, I'm going to give you this last one. We got 2 minutes, 3 minutes before the end of the show here. Give me a topic in Niner land that we haven't covered. It's kind of a slow week. It's the week prior to the draft. The Niners are still doing workouts. People are doing their mock drafts. We'll do one probably next week. Is there any player that you're burning on, or any angle on the draft or any 49er angle that we didn't touch today. But man, if this had been on the Vish Kumaran channel, that you would have brought up.
I don't know if there's anything like that, but there is something I'm personally rooting for. I noticed that the Niners have met with Jaden Reed. I'm hoping they do pick him. He's one, it's because he's a really good player from Michigan State. He is really,
Yeah.
really good. But two, it's because he's from the same area as me. He went to a rival high school as me. And I saw him when he was in high school. I think when I was a senior, he was a sophomore, and he was freaking ridiculous. I'll tell
Really?
you.
I love the one thing I love about Midwestern people is I love the work ethic. There's a great work ethic in the Midwest. I mean, if you're a Midwestern guy, you're from Chicago, you're from the Midwest, those guys, they work. They show
Yeah,
up
I
for work.
appreciate that.
It's
That's
a hard
what Colin
work.
Cowherd says about Sam Darnold, Midwest ethos.
Really?
You've never heard that?
No.
It's one of the funniest sports segments of all time. He loved Sam Darnold when he was coming out, so he used to call it a thick, trunky with a Midwest ethos. That's what you used to say about him. That's what he liked about him. Tougher than a $3 steak. That was the other one.
Oh man, there's a lot about McVay in the chat. Did McVay do something today?
Not that I know of.
Oh, okay.
I was actually surprised by the way that McVay came back this year. I thought the way everybody talked about him, he didn't have much less to accomplish, and the Rams are going through a little bit of a lull because they mismanaged their cap completely. But he came back, so I'm surprised.
The guy who as the draft approaches, that the more I watch of this guy, the more I think, oh my God, this guy is really something else. Is the Georgia Tech linebacker? His name's Charlie Thomas. I mean, is that a name that just a random name that like you'd easily forget? Charlie Thomas. But man, you got to watch this guy, Vish. Charlie Thomas from G Tech is a kid from Georgia who just has crazy motor, crazy athleticism, makes nothing but tackles. Remember the guy who played for Florida State, who was at Jacksonville, and he was absolutely kicking butt. And then Telvin Smith. Remember Telvin and how great Telvin was, and then he just disappeared. He was out of the league.
Yeah, Telvin Smith was a stud in on that 17 defense.
This is Telvin Smith. This guy's 6'3", 216 pounds. He was like third in college football in the country in tackles. He runs 4.5. He's kind of that in between size, right? He's kind of a rover linebacker. He's a 4-3 nickel guy. That's really what he is. But man, unfreaking believable. Charlie Thomas. Love that player. Maybe a weak side backer in the NFL. Maybe a nickel and dime player. But I mean, my God, that guy is one of the most underrated players that I think I've seen. Just does nothing but run and hit and make tackle after tackle. And
sounds like a 49er.
I mean, this
hit.
I mean, this guy is a lot like the Niner backers. He's a lot like Greenlaw. He's a lot like Warner. He's a lot like Marcelino. I mean, he's just
Josh said he reminds him of Aziz Al-Shaair.
He there's no question that Charlie Thomas is the real deal. The real deal. Who said that? Josh
in the comments section.
Oh, there you go.
Charlie Thomas is all over the field. A little light, though, Krug. Come on, a little light.
Oh, he's definitely light. But, I mean, when you're talking about a guy who can make 100+ tackles in college, and then you look at him and you're like, wow, this guy is unbelievable athlete. And, it's not like he played in some garbage conference. He played for Georgia Tech. They play a pretty good schedule. And if you watch the film, he's everywhere. He is everywhere. I mean, he's got a frame that I would say easily he could be 225 pounds within a year. And you're looking at, I think, it's just an outstanding NFL linebacker. And I think you're going to get him in the 6th round because he's kind of a tweener. He's kind of a little too light, a little too small, a little too thin. But that's the way linebackers are. And then that's the beauty of the Niners situation, Vish. They get the big boys up front, and they like speed at linebacker, and that guy is incredible. Charlie freaking Thomas. All right, Vish,
I'll check him out. Sounds good.
check him out. Absolutely check him out. I've given you 2 homework assignments. Go check out Joey Fisher from Shepherd and Charlie Thomas from Georgia Tech.
You got Shepherd all 22?
No, I mean I'm looking just off YouTube. I just went off the YouTube.
You find Shepherd full games on YouTube?
Only the only thing I did see some stuff that people had put on Badgent. There was some Shepherd stuff under Badgent because he's the quarterback, and then I watched the right tackle. And Badgent is kind of interesting. I mean, I kind of overlooked him. I guess a lot of people kind of liked him. Jordan Elliott liked him. Brad Graham liked him. So maybe I got to watch more Badgent. But yeah, when I started watching this guy, Joey Fisher from Shepherd, I thought, you know what? That is the Niners' next right tackle, Joey freaking Fisher. I think Mel's on it. I think he's on it.
Joey freaking Fisher.
Vish, who's going to win Warriors Kings tonight?
I mean, look, I'm not going to be stupid and bet against the Warriors.
There's no Draymond.
I will be rooting to light the effing beam, but we're about to get a legendary Steph Curry performance tonight. This is set up for it. I think Klay Thompson has his biggest game of the series too. It feels set up. Those guys almost always respond. I've seen it year after year after year. I will be cheering for the effing beam, but I know that the Warriors are going to win tonight. It's quite obvious.
F the beam. F the beam. This is it. This is it. It's do or die for Golden State. And this is it for the Krug Show for this live stream. Vish, have a great rest of your week. We will talk to you potentially next Tuesday leading into the draft.
Sounds good.
Have a great weekend, brother. Take care.
You too.
The great Vish Kumaran. Phenomenal. Thanks to Vish for stopping by. I love streaming with the great Vish. All right. I also love having a little barbecue from Pig and a Pickle. Can you tell? Can you tell that I don't miss a meal every now and then? I'll hit Pig and a Pickle. It's a good spot. It looks like this.
So New York style sausage was started over 70 years ago. We are the largest producer of fresh Italian sausage on the West Coast.
What makes our sausage in New York style is really the recipe came from back east, from New York, from Connecticut.
If you look at all of our labels, there's maximum 4 or 5 ingredients, which we're really proud of.
There's no preservatives, no MSG, fresh in, fresh out.
The pork comes in fresh, goes out fresh. There's never any freezing throughout the process. We've always used fine quality cuts. We're never gonna deter from that. It's one of the reasons why our sausage is so good. I guarantee you put our sausage up against anybody else's from a flavor standpoint, no one will beat it, hands down.
And do yourself a favor and do me a favor. Go buy a package of the New York style Italian sausage. Guaranteed you will love it. Guaranteed.
All right, coming down the home stretch on the Krug Show. Thanks to Vish for stopping by. Great day today in Northern California. Beautiful weather. Check out a video, by the way. I did a video. Mel Kiper did mock Joey Fisher to the Niners, and I've done a video that will be released on the YouTube channel here coming up shortly. Check for that. Pretty good stuff there. Where is the guy who's asking about post-game tonight? Oh, man, we got EMA beats. Larry will be coming heavy sailor tonight when they lose. Oh, man, I don't feel good about it. There's no Draymond. I mean, stupid NBA. You take Draymond Green off the floor. Way to go. Awesome. Great move. The Warriors have to have this game, and there is no Draymond. And the league wants this series to go on, and the league, would love to see Golden State in that next round. So I don't know. It's one of those games where I'll predict the Warriors win tonight, but I have no idea how. And I can't wait to watch it. Because it's, it's somehow they're going to win. I don't know how. Mitchell and Ness says, if the Warriors lose tonight, will the Boo Birds come out? No, they're not going to get booed at their own arena. Do the Kings light the beam on the road, by the way? I think they do, don't they? Don't they still light the beam even when they win on the road? I thought they did. I thought I read that when they win, the beam still goes up. I know it's in their arena. It's not going to be on the Warriors arena. Mitchell and Ness. I've never been so unexcited to watch a playoff game in my life. Oh, I don't know about that. There's been a lot worse games than Warriors Kings. Josh says, I don't see how they win without Draymond. Yeah, I don't either. It's hard to picture them winning this game without Draymond Green. They absolutely have to have Draymond Green, and they're not going to have him tonight. So do the Warriors win? Does Kuminga step up somehow, some way? Yeah. Oh, here we go. NorCal, refrigeration, and HVAC. Is there a Warrior postgame tonight? Damn right there's a Warrior postgame tonight. Now, we have Giants-Mets going tonight as well. And I think Danny's going to probably do postgame for Giants-Mets on his channel, NorCal Sports Network. We'll maybe invite him over when the Giants-Mets post ends. But, yeah, we're doing Warrior post. Frank Red's going to be in the house. Baller, Bay Area Baller is going to be in the house. Cy is going to be in the house. JD from 95.7 possibly will be in the house as well. Possibly a cameo from Danny. You never know about Rye. He made some rumblings about wanting to be on Thursday night. It is Thursday night. So who knows? It could be a monster deal. But check that out tonight on the Krug Show. Should be a lot of fun. We had a lot of people in the last post game for the playoffs, and we had like 500-600 people in the room. So I'm expecting a blowout show tonight. And who knows? Who knows? Maybe seems like the last couple Warriors shows, we just start arguing with each other. One night it was Dan and Cy. The next night it's Cy and JD. Pretty much nobody argues with me or Frank or Baller, but Cy's always in the middle of it. So anyway, that's coming up tonight. We'll be yelling. We'll be screaming. All right, I got to go. I got to go watch my son play a little high school baseball, which is my true joy in life, watching my kid play high school baseball. But hope you enjoyed the 49er live stream with Vish. Check us out for a little Warrior live stream tonight. Me and Grant Napier go tomorrow morning on his channel. Should be good. Go Warriors. Fuck the beam. Win a game. G. Martinez says, Cy is the common denominator in all the arguments. Let me think about that for a second. Yes, I've noticed. Bomber T says 95.7 The Game only had around 100 viewers. Larry had 600 plus at least. Yeah, well, sorry about that, 95.7. We'll send a few over. We'll tell the people who don't want to hang here, hey, go check them out. No, but we're joking. But what can we say? What can we say? I mean, I'd rather hear Cy and Frank and, and our back and forth and all of our organic breakdown than, the broadcast. I probably would. So what can you say? But join us tonight. Should be rocking, should be rolling. Bomber T said, doing big things, Larry. Absolutely. Thanks to everybody who has supported the channel for the last year plus. We're approaching 17,000 subs. 17,000 subs. Didn't think we'd get here this fast. Planning for the next year to be even bigger than this year. That does it for us. I'm off to watch high school baseball, and until then, check me out tonight in the post game. Go fucking Warriors. Win a goddamn game, please.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get exactly what you asked for. Here for whatever you bring me, getting handled. I answer to no one, I don't